Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. You're here for another special edition of The Pipeline. I'm joined today by Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor. How you doing, Dave? Dave, we can't hear you. You've got your mic muted.
Well, that's not a good start. I'm doing great, Derek. Been a busy day. Been a busy weekend.
Indeed. Very busy weekend. Neither of us had terribly much of holidays, not just because we're worried about cops kicking in our doors during Christmas dinner, but because there's been so much happening in a traditionally very slow time in the news cycle. Last night, you, for Western Standard, had the exclusive story, breaking news. Actually, you were the only news at all that was able to confirm that today, UCP Municipal Affairs Minister Tracy Allard, the MLA for Hawaii Grand Prairie, would resign. That has just happened. Dave, why don't I just throw it over immediately to you to let people know what's happened?
Yeah, it's a crazy day, Derek. Our sources last night confirmed that Allard was going to be resigning, but we had no indication that it was going to be such a political bloodletting that we've seen out of Edmonton just after the lunch hour. By any standards, call it what you want, Night of the Long Knives. It's unprecedented. So I'll just give you the quick rundown, Derek, of what we know at the moment. Tracy Allard has resigned as Municipal Affairs Minister. She said she went to Hawaii to, quote, continue a 17-year holiday tradition. So she was down there with her family, soaking up the sun and the rays. Jamie Huckabay, Kenney's chief of staff, who flew to the United Kingdom, he's been fired. Kenney asked him to resign, and he did so. So he's now out of a job. Jeremy Nixon, parliamentary secretary for civil society, whatever the hell that means, Derek. You may have a better idea than me, has lost that post because of traveling to Hawaii. Red Deer MLA Jason Stephan is out as parliamentary secretary to the Treasury Board because he headed for warmer climates in Arizona. And Tanya Furr, Pat Wren, and Tani Yao have all lost their legislature committee jobs because of their traveling to a nice warm holiday destination. In a statement today, Kenney wasn't made available to the press, but in a statement he said that, quote, these individuals demonstrated extremely poor judgment, and that he had certainly heard loud and strong the anger that Albertans were feeling over this that has grown since it was discovered last week about the snowbird UCP MLAs and staffers. Political scientist Dwayne Bratt from Mount Royal University was quick to chime in, saying Kenney's statement is too little too late. He said if this had happened on Friday, the statement and the firings, it may have limited some political damage. He's careful to say it wouldn't have eliminated, but does say it would have limited. So there you have it, an absolute bloodletting in the Alberta Ledge this afternoon, Derek.
Indeed, yeah. I can't recall seeing something like this. Scandal involves so many. Obviously, there are controversies where leaders will sack someone for good reasons or bad, whatever they are. But I've rarely seen a bloodletting that involves such a large number of the caucus and a large number of very senior staffers. Although, as far as I know, only one staffer got the axe. I don't think the other staffers who were off enjoying their non-lockdown lockdown got the axe, as far as I can tell. But it's quite. They had to do something. There was absolutely no way for them to do nothing. That was their plan. Kenney's never had a scandal he couldn't walk away from. He's walked away from some pretty significant controversies before, but they've always tended to be much more complicated, much more difficult to explain. People can rightly or wrongly dismiss it as saying, oh, this is just the leftist media. This one they couldn't. This one stung them. It was easy to explain, and while people are very personally feeling pain, while the government says if we find you having too many people over for Christmas dinner who are not in your household, we're going to send cops, Gatineau style, kick down your door and arrest you. At the same time as the government's doing something as wickedly authoritarian as that, to have I think more than 10% of the entire legislature, so probably close to 15% or so of the UCP caucus, and a bunch of their staffers overseas. I mean, not to make too dramatic of a comparison, but can you just imagine an East German communist official with the ultimate lockdown of people from stopping people from leaving their own country, but then heading off to West Germany to buy goods, good cheeses and meats in West Germany, something that they would deny their own citizens. That's something they did all the time. It's something that undermined the Berlin Wall. Not to compare as quite apples and apples. I think it's matters of degrees, but I think it's that kind of wicked hypocrisy. And Kenney was hoping that this would just blow over. Dave, I know you're news, but give me your sense. Do you think this is going to be enough to make this all blow over now?
I don't think so, Derek. And I think it all goes back to bumbling by Kenney himself. His statement that he came out with on Friday almost beggared belief. He took the blame for all these UCP people traveling by saying he had not made it clear enough to them that, hey, perhaps you might not want to jet off to Hawaii when the rest of the population is in lockdown. I mean, come on. That's a silly reason. That left the question open. Well, okay, if you left it up to these individual judgments, do you really want a cabinet minister who's stupid enough when she's helping roll out the vaccine province-wide, that she's stupid enough to go on a holiday tradition to Hawaii? Should these people be in your cabinet? And the answer was obviously no. Kenney bumbled it from the beginning. He bumbled it by sitting quiet over the weekend and not saying anything. And the anger grew, and the anger grew, and the anger grew. And, it's to the point now we've even got songs being written about the Allard family tradition. And if you want to give a listen to that, just go on our website, westernstandardonline.com, and just listen to the song. There is an anger buildup in the province, Derek, like I've never seen before, politically wise. And, you can comment on your time in politics and certainly as a close observer, but have you seen anger like this before?
The closest I can think of would be Alison Redford's Fakes on a Plane and Alison Redford's Sky Palace. But those came when she was already effectively on her way out the door. They did not happen midterm like this, where it's expected someone's going to continue on. It's not just a controversy, it's the cover-up or lies about it. I mean, people screw up. Politicians screw up. I can tell you personally, they screw up. The question is, do you take responsibility and fess up and show some accountability for it? Or do you muddy the waters, try to politician your way out of things, blame other people, or even lie about it? Now, you just said, you were referring to Kenney's statement where he says, I'm going to take responsibility for this because I didn't tell my MLAs, cabinet and staff in clear enough terms that they're not supposed to travel abroad for non-essential reasons during a lockdown. Well, let's go to a story you had yesterday. Here is a tweet from Jason Kenney. This was during the first lockdown. It seems pretty clear to me. Dave, why don't you read off the tweet? Tell us what the context was.
This was a Kenney tweet in March, Derek, when the pandemic was first starting to take a hold. He put out a tweet saying he couldn't stress enough, do not leave the province, cancel your traveling. If you're outside of Canada, come home and isolate. If you're in Alberta, and this is key, please follow the advice of health officials. And that was played on CBC News nationally at the time with the breathless announcement that Alberta is expected to announce 7 new cases. Imagine those days again, Derek, when we were announcing.
The good old days of 7 cases.
So now you've got Kenney urging people to listen to what the healthcare authorities are saying. Well, as you say, 15% of his caucus isn't smart enough to do that, and they're just going golfing or to Vegas or wherever they can work on their suntans. like I said, the mind just boggles on stuff like this. And I don't see it going away. I think Kenney's personal leadership will plummet into the dangerous areas. He's around 30% before this happened, and it's going to plummet to the 20% level. Derek, you know what happens when that happens? You start to get rumblings in caucus from MLAs who are worried that if Kenney stays on as leader, we may lose the next election.
Yeah. Well, actually, on that's a great segue. We want to poll on this. We are. Well, actually, we'll get the proper link up here in a second. We are. The Western Standard is trying to commission a poll. We want to see what Albertans think about this right now. We want to see, has this affected Kenney's approval ratings? I think there's a pretty good bet that it has. Has this affected, very importantly, how people intend to vote? Are people just angry, but gonna, at the end of the day, we want to hear from you in the comments section. Are people at the end of the day, 2 years from now, just gonna hold their nose and vote UCP anyway because it's not the NDP? Or are they going to be looking somewhere else? The mainstream media's pollsters are notoriously bad at actually figuring out if there is any other option in Alberta other than the UCP and NDP. Polls show consistently that the third place party in Alberta is other. Well, we want to figure out what is the other. So we want to do polls on that. We want to ask about recall. We're going to get into that in just a little bit here. Should Albertans have the right to recall their MLAs? This is a long-standing promise of the UCP, which they have not kept, despite it being one of the easier pieces. It's just a simple piece of legislation. We want to poll about that. So I'm going to bring up a link here in a second, but we need you to go to westernstandardonline.com, hover over the membership section and go to donate, and you can donate to help us crowdsource for a poll. We're going to come back to that in a second when we've got a link. So what we saw here was, Kenney sacked his minister. She was the only one in cabinet that we're aware of so far overseas. Sonia Savage, the energy minister, was found in Kelowna, BC. I'm a bit more forgiving of that. It does break the travel advisory, but I think by degrees going to Kelowna, it's not much of a difference between going from, Calgary to Kelowna is not much of a difference from going from Calgary to Edmonton. I don't see a big difference there. So she's gotten a pass, and I think that's probably reasonable. But you've got a large number of other MLAs who are in Hawaii, who are in Mexico, in the American Southwest. Why don't you tell us about what Kenney's rap on the wrist for them is about?
Well, they're losing legislature committee jobs, Derek. Being the parliamentary secretary to this cabinet minister or that cabinet minister, and sitting on legislature committees, all of which brings in extra cash for them. Derek, you may know more than I do, what it's going to cost Allard losing a cabinet minister job, but it will be a significant haircut for her. The other ones will be less harsh, but it's more than the loss of money; it's the loss of reputation. In Grand Prairie, Hawaii, riding now, the Tracy Allard supporters are in for a very big fight. They've got protests in front of her office. They've got a Christmas tree adorned with suntan lotion as a decoration. And they're expecting protests because they've already put up a sign saying, hey, protesters, keep off our sidewalk. So all these MLAs are going to have to deal with that at the next election, the loss of face, and it's going to be hard for them to overcome it. And if I was thinking about running against them in the nomination, for the UCP party, I might seize on this already and get to work on it.
Well, I can tell you from experience, UCP nominations have a lot less to do with the local members than they tend to do with who has the support of the leader. The question will be, does Kenney want to replace some of these MLAs? If that's the case, then you will get a nomination in that riding. But if Kenney is still, if these MLAs are still on Kenney's good side, I can tell you, you can get all the memberships you want. Nominations won't defeat an MLA, only a general election will.
I'm not sure how they could be on Kenney's good side. I mean, talk about landing your boss in the muck. and where was the chief party whip in all of this? Why didn't he know all these people were leaving the province?
He did. I can tell you right now, particularly in a government caucus, at the very Kenney, it is possible Kenney didn't know where the backbenchers were. It is probably not, but it is possible. And I think we're going to do some digging around, Dave, to see if we could find some confirmation on this front. I think that's an important point, because now we're into the cover-up part of the story, what they knew and when they knew it, who done it.
Exactly.
Cabinet ministers cannot leave the country. They can't even leave the province without the premier knowing. The chief, and especially the chief of staff to any minister, especially the premier, the first minister, there is a 0% chance that the premier didn't know about that, and he claims ignorance. And this is where where the story is definitely not done. I think a lot of people are going to say that slaps on the wrist, losing a committee job that no one really cares about anyway, that you don't get extra pay for. And the committees have no power in any case. They do what they're told. The two parts of this story I think that are going to continue is this enough? Allard's the only one, Allard and the chief of staff Huckabay are the only ones who really have blood on the floor. Everyone else I think got a slap on the wrist by comparison. That's going to continue. And what Kenney knew and when he knew it, that's going to continue.
Well, you remember the speaking of the cover-up, Derek, what happened in Ontario with their wayward finance minister, Rod Phillips. He left for St. Bart's, and Premier Ford, when it broke, he claimed he only heard about this 2 weeks ago. And then when reporters started digging deeper and deeper, it turns out he knew. Yeah, sorry, let me rephrase that. He only found out about it the morning that the media did when he was in St. Bart's. But it turned out that he knew 2 weeks ago when it happened, and that's causing all sorts of problems in Ontario. Sorry for the mixing up there. So yeah, this story is not going away. When Kenney found out, who was traveling, who told who, is going to continue, unfortunately, for the UCP. Indeed.
Well, let's talk about what's happened with. We'll bring up an image here in a second. Recall legislation. This was a marquee promise by Jason Kenney in the last election. He's going to give Albertans the right to fire their MLAs. They're 2 years in, and this is one of the easiest promises for them to keep. They don't have to consult. They don't have to do a bunch of stuff and studies. They already knew what they were going to do, apparently.
Yeah, Kenney.
We're 2 years into this, and they haven't done it. Can you tell us what's happened on this front?
Yeah, Kenney promised it both during and after the election. On his UCP platform during the election, there was pages devoted to the recall legislation. Now everything involving recall is being scrubbed from the government UCP site. So if you go looking for their platform, it's not there anymore. Well, what we understand, Derek, from Western Standard sources is the old Tory guard within the UCP is dead set against this, and they're trying to make any sort of legislation, if and when it does come through, to have such a high threshold, like you would have to get 80% of all residents or something like that in a riding to make it go forward. That it wouldn't just make any sense. So that seems to be the fight in caucus at the moment is, are they going to do it, and how high are they going to make the recall threshold? But it's come to light again after all this. Canadian Taxpayers Federation Alberta head Franco Terrazzoni put out a release saying, look, if Kenney doesn't want to judge these politicians, then let Albertans judge them, because they would have something to say about the holiday horrors that the UCP is facing now.
Yeah, we've so there, some tweets age better than others. Jason Kenney, I think during or right before the 2019 provincial election, put up a tweet saying that we will give Albertans the right to fire their MLAs if they lost the confidence of their constituents. Now that was working until pretty recently, I think, but all of a sudden, if you click on the link in that tweet to the party's website where the details of that recall platform commitment are, this is what you get. You get a 404 error, and it's got an amusing picture of Rachel Notley. Says 404 error. Oh no, That link is as broken as the NDP's carbon tax. Now, that's got an extra layer of irony right now, I think. Do we have any sense that well, I think you've already kind of said, the Tories probably have no choice politically but to go forward with it, but it appears that they're probably going to bring in recall legislation late in their term before it can be used against them. And they'll probably set the threshold extremely high. We could be wrong, but this is what people in the Tory caucus are telling us right now, who are not happy about kind of the PC old guard getting in the way of this platform commitment.
And this is in general part of what Kenney's problem has been. Talking to UCP supporters, they're very, very frustrated, very angry that the Kenney that they were promised in the election and in the campaign is not the Kenney that has acted that way when he became premier. He hasn't been very hard on Ottawa. All the promises of the own provincial police force and own tax system, all Kenney has done is set up panel after panel after panel to even do more studies on it. And Kenney voters voted for him specifically because they wanted some action. They wanted Kenney the action man, and they got Kenney the ditherer. And I think that's a lot of why his popularity is going down the toilet at the moment.
Well, let's talk about the political consequences of this. Obviously, it's still hot now. It's questionable about if this is going to go away or not. I mean, people who are angry right now are going to say, no, it's not going to go away. It's going to continue. But, I mean, anger at anything eventually does go away, even if it's not been addressed. I think Kenney had three options. He could do nothing, which is what he did do for this scandal until we got word last night from a source that he was going to fire Allard, and he did fire her this morning. So he had the first option, which is nothing. The second option was to offer up a token head or two. That is what he did do. He offered up the heads of Allard and Huckabay and gave a very small slap on the wrist to the other UCP snowbird MLAs, although apparently nothing to the press secretaries that were found overseas. And then the third was the nuclear option, which is to fire all of them from the caucus. And we've seen, the Nova Scotia PC leader today said if he has any snowbird MLAs in his caucus, they will be kicked out. You're one and done. These are kind of the three main options I think he has, and he's gone for the middle option. I don't think it's going to be enough for people to say, okay, he's done right, it's over, let's move on. But it's not nothing. I mean, the firing minister is a big deal, and I can tell you, Jason Kenney does not like to admit he's wrong or to lose a battle. And I think he is admitting now he has lost. He's trying now to mitigate the damage. He's trying to essentially save the furniture at this point. Dave, the political fallout, I think, is going to be quite different on the left, the right, and the center. Maybe let's move from left to center to right and talk about the fallout. What do you think? What effect do you think this is going to have with support for the NDP or parties on the left?
Well, obviously, this is a godsend for NDP leader Rachel Notley. She couldn't have asked for a bigger, more angry scandal than what she's got here. So NDP have been tweeting out daily horror stories, and I'm sure this will continue, and I think it'll even be ramped up because they are probably going to go with the angle of the soft slap on the wrist. A couple of people lost their ledge job that, as you say, nobody cares about or couldn't name anyways. They want they're going to push for the nuclear option and have them expelled from caucus. And I think that is going to help the NDP because I think that's what a lot of people wanted. Before Kenney made the announcement today, they wanted him to do the nuclear option, and he hasn't done so. I think that's going to disappoint the right and the center and the UCP supporters. And I think some of them may move to the left when they say, you know what, Rachel Notley's got the right idea. She should have done that. And by the way, she's come out and said there have been no NDP MLAs that left the province. She was very clear on that.
Yeah, that has allowed them to throw some stones because They didn't do it right away because they wanted to make sure they were not in a glass house on this one. They were very cautious coming out of the gates. They're like, oh shit, what if we've got some? We can get caught up in it too. Federally, you can't see. The three major parties federally, the Liberals, the Tories, and the NDP have all had people. As far as I know, there's been no discipline on the Tory side, but there has been on the Liberal side and the NDP side, which is all just made it more uncomfortable for Jason Kenney that the bar for accountability for a Trudeau Liberal or a Jagmeet Singh New Democrat Socialist is higher than for an Alberta Tory.
When you see
a lot of pressure.
Derek, when you see Liberals voluntarily stepping down and UCP guys in Alberta doing nothing but trying to hide, then yeah, that's a huge problem for UCP party.
I think one reason he may have waited so long wasn't just that he thought it would blow over, but potentially because they still just didn't know how many were out. I mean, if it was just Tracy Allard and they were confident it was just Tracy Allard, maybe she would have been fired right away. But they had no idea how many it was. And if you fire one, you have to fire others. So I think they wanted to have discipline come down all at once rather than piecemeal. Because if you fired Allard and then it came out Nixon or Furr or one of these others were doing it, then you have to fire each and every single one of them. And eventually you get down to a minority government caucus.
Last I heard, they haven't even been able to find Fort McMurray MLA Yao. He's in Mexico somewhere, but they haven't even been able to contact him to say, get your ass home. So
I know Tenny personally. He's a likable guy, but he is in for a very bad moment when he gets back to cell reception and turns on his phone. That is going to be that'll be a rough that'll be an unfortunate day.
Yeah, he's going to be going from about plus 30 to minus 15 Celsius when he lands in Fort Mac. So talk about a chilly reception.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's talk more about political fallout on the right. Broadly speaking, not to overly simplify things, but I think fairly break things down. Peter McCaffrey from the Alberta Institute, I think, put it really well. There's roughly 35% of the left tribe in Alberta, which identifies with the NDP, that have been angry that the lockdowns aren't hard enough, they weren't fast enough, that they want more draconian measures. You have 35% roughly of Albertans who are from the old Wild Rose tribe, who believe that the lockdown and the restrictions have already been too draconian, too authoritarian, that the government is just caving to political pressure, and they've already not been happy. And then you've got roughly 30% of the, let's call it the center or progressive conservative tribe, and they kind of more or less, they've generally thought Kenney has made the best of a bunch of bad options. All three of these tribes are very, very pissed off right now, and the one that's very dangerous is that right Wild Rose populist tribe. They're now able to say, I think very correctly, this was already too far. We don't think you even believed it when you did it, but then you didn't even abide by it yourself. You need to end the lockdown now. And the cabinet renewal of the lockdown is coming up in just a few days. I cannot see how the government has the political capital right now to renew the lockdown. If they renew the lockdown, the friggin' legislature will get burned down. People are going to say, you have no moral right to lock us down when you're doing this. You may have cut off the head of one minister, but what about the other 5 or 6 MLAs and the other staffers who have had just a tiny slap on the wrist? If I have Christmas dinner with my family, I get cops at my door and I could get arrested. So I think this is the end of the lockdown. I cannot see how they have the political capital to renew this now.
I think the key is going to be the number of reported cases of COVID that we're having over the next couple of days. Today should be a very, very high number because we didn't get reporting or accurate reporting over the weekend. You look at Ontario, 3,000 plus cases today. It's out of control. The virus is out of control in Ontario, and they're bringing in even harsher lockdowns. Scotland, back in lockdown as of tonight. Great Britain, back in lockdown as of tonight. So if these numbers continue to rise in Alberta, And I tend to agree with you. I can't see Kenney extending the lockdown. Then is he going to lift it when the pandemic is still raging? And wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
Well, he's going to have a hard time from either angle. If he does end the lockdown because he doesn't have the political capital for it, the NDP, from their perspective, will be able to say, you're not following the science, you're not following the advice of Hinshaw, you're ending the lockdown, which is necessary because of your political scandal. So your political scandal is now getting in the way of public health. That's what the left is going to say. And from their perspective, they're going to have a real argument to make about that. That's a fair point from their perspective. But from the other perspective, much more dangerous, I think, politically for Kenney, is he has no way of extending this lockdown further after what has just happened. I mean, if you think, a couple of hundred freedom marchers in downtown Calgary, Edmonton, and Red Deer are a problem now, you just try extending this lockdown when we've just come through a scandal like this, or we're still in the middle of a scandal like this. I think he's between a real rock and a hard place here.
Well, Wild Rose leader Paul Hinman, in an exclusive column today that's on the Western Standard website at the moment, Derek, he calls on Kenney to immediately lift the lockdown. And he's been opposed to it since day one. And you're right. If Kenney does continue it, then he's looking at leaking support from that hardcore Wild Rose grouping that you've talked about into the hands of the Wild Rose Independence Party. And it's like I said, as you've said, rock and a hard place for Premier Kenney, that's for sure.
Indeed. We're gonna, so a reminder here, we want to know what Albertans are thinking about this. I got a pretty good idea, but it's one thing to watch the comments on this broadcast or comments on Facebook or Twitter, social media. While we appreciate it, it is not a representative sample, a scientific sample of what people at large think. We want to get a really good idea of people who are not necessarily as engaged in current issues as all of our viewers might be right now. So we're going to commission a professional, independent poll on this, and we need people to donate to do it. Remember, we don't take a penny from the federal government's media bailout. We are funded completely as a private business, by advertisers and by voluntary members like you. If you want to contribute, go to Western Standard Online, click on membership and become a member. Or if you're already a member, please go westernstandardonline.com/donate-poll/. And there you can make a donation to help us commission a poll. We want to get it out in the field tonight. We want to know what people are thinking right now. Do they think that there needs to be more resignations here? Do people think that we need recall legislation? Do people think we need to end the lockdowns? Does the government have the moral authority to continue lockdowns? And we want to see what the political fallout has been in terms of how people actually intend to vote. Are people just angry right now, but come election time going to say, well, I guess we have to pick the lesser of evils, or are people going to do something different? We want to know. So if, we understand a lot of people are out of work right now, but if you are able to afford it, please go to the website, become a member, or donate to help us get this poll done. God, we just got comments pulling in here. We can hardly stay on top of it, but we're seeing a hell of a lot. Just a reminder to folks, we will only display your comments if they're relatively short. Here, I'll find an example of one we cannot display. Here, see? If it looks like we're drowning in comments, we don't show comments like that. It's not because of the content of what you're saying, it's just because it's too big. Keep it nice and short, and then we can put her up on the screen. Also,
without swear words too would be nice.
Yeah, we've got one, the very latest comment right now. Sorry, we can't show. We'll allow shit. Shit's allowed. Ass hat. But we're going to draw the line somewhere, unless you're particularly funny. If you've got a cuss in it and you're particularly funny, and if Dave and I have been drinking, maybe we'll put you up. But so just be aware there's some ground rules. Dave, anything else before we wrap up?
I'd like to ask you a favor, if you could, Derek. Could you turn off the news taps for just like an hour or so this afternoon so we can all watch Canada-Russia in the junior game?
Oh, you got to take that up with the government. God, it has been exhausting. I haven't had much of a weekend. I'm not sad about it because our readership numbers are off the chart. You know, some of our viewers might know last month we had 1.3 million readers on the Western Standard. That makes us one of the biggest news websites in all Canada, not just the West, but on a national stage. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it's thanks to our members who are contributing to help us do this without government bailouts, and to our great journalists and columnists like Dave, who is just an absolute machine. You were working at midnight last night. I think the last one of the day was the where you had the inside scoop on Allard resigning. The Western Standard was the only source in Canada that was able to confirm that she was expected to resign today, and that turned out to be true. Although between you and me, Dave, even if she didn't, even if it turned out not to be true, I think it was inevitable that our story would eventually be right. So even if our source was bad, the story would probably still be correct. So we could have just made
like a broken clock. You only have to be right twice a day, right?
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dave, and thank you all our viewers who have joined us today. To all our members, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for contributing to us, Bailout Free Media, and all of you who enjoy the work of the Western Standard, who enjoy having an independent Western media outlet that refuses to accept the Trudeau government's media bailout dollars. Please become a Western Standard member. We can only do this with your support. We can continue to grow our operations, hold governments to account, and provide important stories to Westerners. Go to westernstandardonline.com, click on membership. For just a couple bucks a month, you can ensure that you've got a Western media outlet that's on your side. Thank you all very much for joining us today. God bless. Enjoy the end of your holidays.